It's me. So I wanted to talk to you about something. Well, how do I put this?
You and FDR.
So I want to talk about the State of the Union. Now, I know it's been a week, maybe more, and we're not really in the breaking news business over here. See, I'd rather ruminate on things than react. But like a lot of people in the country, I'd kind of planned on mostly ignoring Biden's State of the Union address. I find it a perfunctory bit of theater for the most part, a combination of immediate revisionist history and empty promises. Not to mention, I was hardly in the mood to watch an octogenarian wax poetic about a bygone era of bipartisanship and talk about the soul of America in front of a majority white, wealthy, and increasingly older Congress. But I couldn't help but watch. And I gotta say, it wasn't bad. I'm not talking about the way that he navigated around jeers from Republicans and somehow got them all to agree that the government won't be slashing Social Security and Medicare. I mean, he literally got Republicans to stand up and applaud the very benefits that some of them were hoping to slash as part of their debt ceiling fight. Well done. What got my attention was the substance of the speech. Now, before we get there, let's go back a couple of weeks to Bernie Sanders' economic address. In those remarks, Sanders laid out his vision as the new chair of the Senate's Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, including delivering on affordable health care, child care, supporting unions, corporate concentration, lowering prescription drug costs, and a lot more. A true economic vision to support the working class. Now, these are themes that we've come to expect from Bernie, of course. But I wanted to point them out first to demonstrate how much of the Sanders narrative has worked its way into the Biden agenda. Increase Pell Grants for poor students. Finish the job on student debt relief. Increase taxes on corporations. Fund the IRS to enforce tax collection from billionaires and millionaires. Implement a tax on stock buybacks. I've never had the talk with my children. Reinstate the assault weapons ban. Do more to fight for LGBTQ rights. It's time to pass the PRO Act to protect the right to unionize. More sick and paid family leave. Restore the paid child tax credit. Provide home health care coverage, prescription drug price caps for seniors, universal pre-K, free public college, provide citizenship for the dreamers and extend working visas, restrict data collection from big tech. If you guessed Bernie for all of this, you'd be right. If you guessed Biden for all of this, you'd also be right. President Biden also rallied against monopoly power. He talked about antitrust in a way that no president had done in decades. He called on Congress to quadruple the tax on corporate stock buybacks, and actually uttered the phrase big pharma while urging members of Congress, many of whom are in the pocket of the pharmaceutical industry, to cap insulin prices for all Americans at $35 a month. To the extent that Biden and Sanders share an economic vision for the country, it's largely limited to the desire to appeal to working-class voters. Biden, who felt it necessary to refer to himself as a capitalist during the speech, and who during his time as a senator ran in lockstep with the banking industry, is not interested in waging an all-out war on the 1% as Sanders is. But there are some things that we can't ignore. Those in the financial industry were noticeably uncomfortable with Biden's address, and this may have been one of the most populist pro-working class State of the Union addresses in recent history. Now, we assumed that this was the point where we were all about to be gaslit, as is customary in these annual gatherings of seemingly chummy political rivals who supposedly detest one another. But that didn't happen. Much of the speech focused on the economy, an economy for working people. He talked about bringing back manufacturing jobs, which is actually happening, and told Congress to institute a higher tax on billionaires. Reward work, not just wealth, he said. He boasted about the unemployment rate, which remains at a 5-decade low. Citing recent record profits for the oil and gas industry, Biden urged lawmakers to quadruple the tax on stock buybacks, a financial scheme that was once considered illegal as a form of stock manipulation, but is now the norm in corporate America, helping to press wages and creating little incentive for companies to invest profits back into businesses. So let's stick with the oil and gas industry for a second. Some of the largest firms in the world, BP, Chevron, ExxonMobil, and Shell among them, generated $199 billion in profits in 2022. And instead of using those profits to support the transition to clean energy and combat climate change, promises these firms themselves made to the public and to lawmakers, to everybody, they instead feel emboldened to double down on fossil fuels and are lavishing their shareholders with buybacks. Now here's where things get really interesting. Biden accused big corporations, from airlines and ticket sellers to big banks, of unfairly ripping off consumers, saying, quote, "Capitalism without competition is not capitalism, it's exploitation." We know that. But from this guy? Biden became the first president since 1979 to mention antitrust in a State of the Union, and it was incredibly effective. He all but waged war on the so-called junk fees, those sneaky charges that are layered on top of the cost of goods and services. That Biden devoted a section of his speech to what are effectively fake fees meant to drive up corporate profits is not insignificant when you consider the impact of monopoly power in our economy. When Biden said, quote, "Junk fees may not matter to the very wealthy, but they matter to most folks in the homes like the one I grew up in," he was sending a clear message to America's working class that he's thinking of them. Sure, progressives like Sanders do this all the time, but this tack was revealing because it suggests that the messaging will be at the heart of a big D Democratic politics for the foreseeable future. We may not love this because we want a progressive challenger to primary Biden, because that's how things should work in an ostensible democracy. But this was the type of criticism of capitalism that we rarely hear on such a big stage, as milquetoast as it may seem, coming from a guy who, as senator, made it harder for Americans to discharge debt. Specifically, Biden called for a ban on so-called resort fees at hotels, which are added to the costs that aren't typically disclosed until you're at the final stage of completing a booking. Free market ideologues will tell you that competition alone can root out the problem. For example, another hotel can simply refuse to pass along these extra costs. The problem is monopoly power. There just aren't many choices out there for consumers. And this isn't just a hotel industry problem. These fees are everywhere, from air travel and banking to telecommunications and events and entertainment. There's a cost to concentration to the tune of $5,000 on average per year for American households. Wherever you turn, we're getting stiffed. Again, Biden's word. He called out internet providers for charging exorbitant prices for you to switch to a competitor, if there even is one in your area. Ticket sellers like Ticketmasters for exorbitant and often perplexing surcharges, and airlines for all sorts of vulturistic behavior, such as hiking up prices on families that want to sit together.
Baggage fees are bad enough. Airlines can't treat your child like a piece of baggage.
Before moving on, I want to get real about something. This is a very different Biden than the Joe Biden who protected credit card companies from regulation in his home state of Delaware. The same Joe Biden who said for decades that Social Security should be cut. And the same Joe Biden who continues to talk a big game about the rights of workers, but turned his back on striking rail workers by invoking a 100-year-old rule to protect the rail oligarchy just this past year. That Americans are getting raked over the coals for basic services is the result of decades of increased market concentration across industries, a deregulatory regime that's been almost completely defanged, and a declining union density, which has also meant that millions of Americans have seen their wages stagnate while the rich have amassed considerable wealth and political power. The latter was made frustratingly clear by the pandemic, which exacerbated an already untenable wealth inequality gap. Now, the richest 10% of people in the world own more than 3/4 of the globe's wealth. And make no mistake, concentration has been a key factor in the ever-worsening financial dystopia. To that point, from 1985 to 2017, the number of mergers completed annually rose from 2,300 to 15,000, according to researchers at the Roosevelt Institute. So, does it matter that Biden dedicated a significant amount of airtime to things like junk fees and market concentration? Well, those who are experts in antitrust were pleasantly surprised, if not outright giddy, about what they heard. Here's how journalist Matt Stoller put it. Quote, "Normal people get what Biden was discussing. Just like in the 1950s, they understood things like roads, electricity, and telephone service," end quote. Stoller then compared Biden's State of the Union address to third-year speeches given by his Democratic predecessors, Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. Both used the privilege of their office to talk about shrinking the size of government, and in Obama's case, capitulating to Republican demands about lowering the deficit.
Just 2 years ago, it was an open question whether we would find the strength to cut the deficit. Thanks to the courage of the people who were here then, many of whom didn't return, we did cut the deficit. We began to do what others said would not be done.
If we make the hard choices now to rein in our deficits, we can make the investments we need to win the future.
Here again is Stoller. The villain for both Clinton and Obama was slothful government, or vague, bad values Americans express towards each other. To say that Biden changed this framework is to dramatically understate the matter. So, no, Biden is not Bernie. He never will be. But to have the most powerful person in the world challenge, even rhetorically, monopoly power is no small thing. We all still wish he stood up for overworked and underpaid rail workers, fought harder for a federal minimum wage, was more strategic about trying to pass the social spending initiatives and Build Back Better, supported Medicare for all instead of the corporate-friendly ACA, and was more aggressive in combating the climate crisis, instead of outpacing Trump in issuing oil and gas drilling permits on public land. Biden is not my guy, but he's the guy we got. But I think one can be both progressive and pragmatic. The biggest surprise to me is Biden's table. There's no doubt that Joe Manchin and Republicans have a seat at his table. This is still the guy that eulogized Strom Thurmond. But what I didn't see coming is the seat that Bernie occupies. It's more than clear that Sanders has a legitimate seat at his table and has influenced the administration in palpable ways. This makes political sense in two ways that made me realize Joe Biden is a far better politician than I've given him credit for. The first is that progressive ideas are really freaking popular. The second is that he's neutralizing Bernie and whoever might try to follow in his footsteps. It's populist, it's ruthless, and I didn't see it coming. Here endeth the video.